Good evening, welcome back. It is Thursday, September 21st, 2023. We have a couple of events and a couple of birthdays to go over really quickly. I'm going to start back in 1986. I'm looking at the list of events. There really wasn't a lot of races, at least big races, meaning like NASCAR, Formula One, IndyCar, etc., on this particular date, but just a couple of them stood out visibly to me. 1986, Rusty Wallace wins his second career Cup Series race at Martinsville in a really good late race duel with Jeff Bodine. If you go back and watch this race, Rusty Wallace actually had one of Morgan Shepherd's crewmen changing one of the tires, or maybe it was Jeff Bodine's team. One of the two teams had another crewman come over and help them just because they were quicker on the tire change. Also, Kyle Petty and Ricky Rudd got involved in a crash in this race. And in the interview, they asked Ricky what happened, and he basically said the idiot driving the 7-Eleven car turned him into the wall. So not a good day for Ricky after coming off of a win the previous week at Dover. Then in 2013, this is the only other event I picked out today for today's date. 2013 at Kentucky in the Nationwide Series, Ryan Blaney wins his first career Nationwide, now Xfinity Series race. So I'm sure that was a big moment for that group. The Blaney family, of course, with Ryan, or his dad Dave, of course, his grandfather and his uncle. Just a big racing family there, especially in Ohio. And with that being a border state of Ohio, I'm sure it was pretty well, pretty feel good type of a victory there. So a few birthdays. I didn't see any cards of this guy in my collection. I know there's a few out there. He was kind of destined to be a star in IndyCar Series, but that star kind of faded quick. I know that there was some issues, not exactly sure what happened, but born on this day in 1980, Tomas Schechter. No, he had a couple good rides, and there's just some controversy whether I think one time maybe he didn't show up for a practice session, couldn't be found, and then he just walked away from the car. And be that as it may, you can't do that, Tomas. Born on this date in 1959, a journeyman NASCAR driver, had a couple years in a mid-level team but didn't have much success. Mr. Curtis Markham. I know he's been a spotter and a driving coach. This is when he was with the Hensley team there in the mid-90s. But he had a few cup starts in the 80s, but just journeyman driver. Didn't really have, not going to say he had a bad career. He did the best with the equipment that he was provided, but just didn't reach levels that others reached, but still got a lot further than most. Born on this day in 1933, 90 years old today. 90 years old, wow. And that would be former team owner and driver, Mr. Dick Simon. If you see here, always had a lot of sponsors on his cars. We're going to flip these around, give you a little bit of information there about him and his different races. Let you pause that so you can read it. And I always remember Simon's teams, especially in the late 80s, he might show up to an IndyCar race with 5 cars. Now, they're all going to finish between 7th and 15th, and sometimes they might go lead a few laps. They might win a pole here and there, but he always had nice equipment and just always was bitten by bad luck. But he always had sponsors, always had cars, always had drivers. So he was kind of like one of the first mega teams, but on a lower budget. Up next, born on this day in 1953, is a two-time Indianapolis 500 winner. Raced a little bit in the IROC series, but never really got outside of that IndyCar/road racing, Mr. Arie Luyendyk. So here we have the French card, and the English card out of this set. I like this one, the Granatelli. Of course, he's running the 1, so that would have been in 1991 because he was the defending Indy 500 champion as he won for Doug Shearson in 1990. He's a driver of the Target Ganassi car for a minute. This is his Rookie of the Year card. Of course, he was 1985 Indy 500 Rookie of the Year. There's a good look at him when he was a Target Chip Ganassi driver. There's just a peek of the Domino's pizza. Provimi Veal is always one of his sponsors. And then that's later in his career during the IRL, where you can see Team Menard. Marlboro logos were always on his car, and there's a good look at the Granatelli uniform that he had back in the very, very early 90s. I believe that team also folded. Of course, a lot of the IndyCar teams of the early 90s are long gone. Of course, you still have Penske and Ganassi still around. And our final birthday is a NASCAR Hall of Famer, a multi-time championship car owner in the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series and the Truck Series. That would be none other than RC himself, Mr. Richard Childress. Of course, we've got a couple of 91 Maxes here. One is the update, one is the regular. I think that's the update right there. But almost everything here is going to have him in his Goodwrench black. A nice little 5-sport there, pretty neat card. Pole position. Of course, his driving career in the Cup Series started in 1969 and ended in 1981. He put Earnhardt in the 3-car for the end of the 81 season. Then he put Rudd in the car in 82 and 83. Earnhardt came back till in 84 all the way to 01. Then he started a second team in 96 for Skinner. Skinner ran in that car from 96 part-time, 97 full-time. And then at the end of 2001, Skinner was released. Childress has had 4 cars at one time in the Cup Series. And to this day, still has 2 cars in the Xfinity Series. Of course, he has 2 Cup cars right now. Kyle Busch and his grandson, Austin Dillon. And he won the inaugural Truck Series championship with Mike Skinner as his driver in 1995. So a very, very big resume there for Richard Childress. Obviously in the Hall of Fame as an owner, because his driver stats they weren't that good. He had some top 5s, some top 10s, few laps led. But he was in that second echelon of drivers and teams just because of funding and finances and so on and so forth. But went to build one of the first superstar teams. Not a super team. He's not a Ganassi. Or, sorry, that was IndyCar still in the brain. He wasn't a Hendrick or a Gibbs. But he was always in that conversation. And I think Kyle Busch is going to help elevate him back to a top 3 or 4 level organization in NASCAR. So anyway, that is birthdays and events for today. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Thanks again for watching. Really, really do appreciate it. And we will see you tomorrow.